At the Low Country Children's Hospital Gala, a woman in a black wheelchair sat alone near the dessert table while the ballroom pretended not to see her. The chandeliers above the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel poured warm light over silk gowns, tuxedos, champagne flutes, and the polished kindness of wealthy people raising money for children they would likely never meet. A string quartet played near the stage. Servers moved like shadows between white linen tables. Donors laughed softly, their voices measured, careful, expensive. And at the edge of all that brightness sat Margot Ellsworth, dressed in navy, hands folded in her lap, watching the room do what rooms had done to her since the accident, adjust around her without including her. Two guests walked past and looked over her head. A woman asked whether the restroom was down that way without waiting for an answer. Then a man in a tuxedo set his empty champagne flute into Margot's hand, mistaking her for staff because it was easier for his mind to place a woman in a wheelchair near a table as service than as power. Margot accepted the glass without expression. She had learned that public humiliation was rarely loud. Most of the time, it arrived dressed as carelessness. Then the side door opened. A man in a worn jacket entered carrying a wrapped shower bench beneath one arm, his 8-year-old son beside him in a stiff bow tie and shoes already scuffed at the toes. The man handed the bench to a hospital coordinator, turned and saw the empty flute in Margot's hand. He saw her face. Not the chair, not the event badge, not the expensive navy suit. Her. Something tightened in his chest. He crossed the room without asking anyone who she was, pulled out a chair at a nearby table and said, "There's a table over there with 2 chairs and a piece of pecan pie my boy is about to murder. Join us." Margot looked at him long enough to know he was not rescuing her. He was inviting her. There is a difference. She rolled forward. 10 minutes later, his son Eli was asking about the camber of her rear wheels like he had discovered a NASA rover. The man, Dawson Reed, asked which piece from the string quartet she liked best. She said Dvorak. He admitted he had never had an opinion about Dvorak and asked her to teach him one. Then the ballroom lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium and smiled into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our gracious host this evening, the Chief Executive Officer of Ellsworth Hospitality Group, Margot Ellsworth." The room turned toward the stage, then toward the dessert table, then toward the woman in the wheelchair sitting beside a single father and a boy with pie on his cheek. The room went silent. Margot set down her napkin. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, and rolled toward the stage. Dawson did not move. Eli whispered, "Daddy, was that her?" Dawson did not answer. His eyes had found the small machined logo on the rear frame of her chair. M Active 03. DR. He knew that logo. He had drawn it. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity, grace, and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us that respect is not a grand speech. Sometimes it is simply making room at the table before you know who someone is. Now, back to Dawson Reed. 2 weeks before the gala, Dawson Reed was bent over a long oak table in a workshop at the back of a narrow lot off Dorchester Road in North Charleston, drawing sightlines from the seated height of a wheelchair user. Sawdust floated in the late October light. 3 folders lay open in front of him. The top one was labeled Reed Adaptive Renovations. RFP Response. Ellsworth Heritage Hotel. The bid was due in 9 days. Dawson had walked the hotel lobby the week before, pretending to admire the historic plasterwork while quietly counting obstacles. The main entrance had brass rails and a beautiful set of steps that announced elegance to people who could climb them and inconvenience to everyone else. The accessible route existed, technically, hidden behind a side door near service deliveries. the kind of solution that told disabled guests they were welcome as long as they entered where nobody important had to watch. The second-floor corridor narrowed near the west stairwell. The elevator call button sat too high. A marble threshold looked harmless until measured from the front casters of a chair. Dawson marked every pinch point on a folded paper map he kept in his jacket pocket, then brought the map home and translated it into a proposal that did not apologize for access as an afterthought. He believed access should be original architecture, not a patch. He had believed that long before grief turned belief into work. In the corner of the workshop, beside a small heater that complained every morning before producing warmth, Eli Reed built a Lego crane with a working pulley. He had been at it for 2 hours and had spoken only when the engineering problem demanded it. "Dad," he said without looking up, "does the rope go on the top wheel or the bottom wheel?" Dawson lifted his pencil. "Top, then bottom, then back to the top." Eli frowned. "That is a lot of going." "That's how cranes work, buddy." Eli nodded with the solemnity of a foreman approving a load plan and returned to the string. Under the table, Bear, a 14-year-old lab mix with cloudy eyes and a deep suspicion of movement, sighed as if the whole workshop had become too ambitious. Above the pegboard, half hidden behind clamps, a framed certificate leaned face down against the wall. Georgia Institute of Technology. Sinclair Foundation Adaptive Design Fellowship. Dawson had not looked at it in years. Beside it sat engineering journals still wrapped in mailing plastic, subscriptions he never canceled because canceling them felt too much like admitting a door had closed. His phone rang. Low Country Children's Hospital Development Office. "Mr. Reed," a woman said brightly, "it's Marissa from the Gala team. The roll-in shower bench you donated for the Halloran family is being featured in the donation showcase Friday night. We'd love for you to bring it personally. There's a family table for you and Eli, too." Dawson rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Marissa, I'm not really a gala guy. It would mean a lot to the Hallorans." He looked at Eli, who had finally produced a working pulley and was trying very hard not to demand applause. Then he looked at the Ellsworth folder. The gala was at the exact hotel he was bidding on. He could walk the public spaces in a jacket instead of a work shirt and measure with his eyes. "All right," he said. "We'll be there." Friday came overcast. Eli stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fighting a bow tie stiff enough to qualify as construction material. Dawson knotted it for him with hands that remembered tying his own wedding tie. His left ring finger caught the bathroom light. He had never taken the ring off. Hannah had given it to him on a warm day in Decatur before illness had entered their house and rearranged all the furniture of their future. She had been a teacher then, sharp-witted and stubborn, the first person to look at Dawson's sketches and tell him his work was not mechanical, but moral. Later, when multiple sclerosis made her body unpredictable, she became his fiercest design partner. She refused pity, rejected lazy solutions, and once told a room full of engineers that if they designed another wheelchair like a hospital apology, she would roll over their shoes until they learned shame. Dawson had designed the first active frame for her kitchen, then the second for her classroom, then the third when she could no longer teach but still wanted to turn herself toward the window without needing permission. After she died, Meridian Mobility kept the patents. They kept the frame. They kept the marketing language. Under a work-for-hire contract Dawson had signed before he knew grief could make paperwork cruel, they even kept his name from the product line. He walked away with Eli, a box of old notebooks, and the ring. Now he straightened his son's bow tie and said, "You look dangerous." Eli smiled at the mirror. "Like a spy?" "Like a spy who eats too much pie." They drove east over the Cooper River, bridge cables ticking past the truck window like a metronome. When the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel appeared on East Bay Street, Dawson slowed. He counted the front steps, the slope to the side door, the distance from curb to lobby, and 3 places where accessibility had been hidden so politely it had become exclusion with nicer paint. He said nothing. Eli practiced his gala smile. Across the harbor that same Friday morning, Margot Ellsworth sat at her desk in the Ellsworth Tower penthouse on Meeting Street, while her chief of staff, Hadley Allard, reviewed the evening schedule with 2 coffees and the tired authority of a woman who could make chaos stand in line. Cocktails at 6:30, opening remarks at 7:45, dinner at 8. If you read the speech and skip the donor circle afterward, I can have you in the car by 9. Margot looked up. I am the host. I am not hiding. Hadley did not argue. She had worked for Margot 11 months, long enough to know which walls were load-bearing. Margot had been CEO of Ellsworth Hospitality Group for 14 months, a position she inherited after her father's death and had earned every day since by refusing to let Charleston society treat her as a ceremonial daughter. The Ellsworth name sat on hotels, restaurants, historic properties, and foundation grants all across the Low Country. People assumed wealth insulated her from ordinary loneliness. It did not. Wealth changed the furniture in the room, not the ache. The accident had happened 6 years and 2 months earlier, off Sullivan's Island, on a bright August afternoon when a sailboat boom swung wrong and the sky disappeared in white canvas in pain. Margot remembered sound first, then sun, then hospital ceiling tiles, then her father's hand around hers, too tight. After the spinal injury, people spoke to her differently. Some softened their voices, as though paralysis had made her fragile everywhere. Some performed admiration in ways that exhausted her. Others looked past her entirely, embarrassed by the chair or by their own lack of imagination. Galas were the hardest, not because she hated attention, but because she hated the false compassion that came with it. 15 minutes before any speech, she usually rolled toward a quiet corner near the dessert tables and called it reading the room. She knew, privately, that it was also hiding in plain sight. That night, she did exactly that. She watched donors pass. She watched staff hustle. She watched a board member laugh with his head thrown back near the champagne station while ignoring the ramp that had been placed at the wrong angle near the side stage. Then came the woman asking for the restroom, the coat handed toward her shoulder, the man placing the empty flute in her hand without even meeting her eyes. Margot set it on the dessert table beside a tray of pecan tarts and told herself she was not tired. Then the side door opened, and Dawson Reed entered with Eli. Their jackets were not new. Eli's bow tie was crooked. Dawson carried a shower bench wrapped in protective plastic as if it mattered, because it did. He handed it to the coordinator, turned, and saw her. Not as a symbol, not as a lesson, not as a sad woman near the cake, just a person who had been handed someone else's empty glass. When he invited her to the table, she almost refused out of habit. Then she saw his face. No pity, no calculation, no recognition. So she said yes. Eli asked whether the rear wheels leaned outward for speed or turning. Margot told him camber improved lateral stability and hand clearance. Eli nodded as if this confirmed several private theories. Dawson listened. He did not interrupt. He did not congratulate her for existing in public. He asked what music she liked. When she said Dvořák, he asked why. For 10 minutes, she forgot she was being watched because 2 people at a table were simply sharing space. Then her name filled the ballroom. CEO. Host. Margot Ellsworth. The room's sudden attention had weight, but she had carried heavier things. She rolled to the stage, gave the speech, thanked donors, honored the hospital staff, and raised more money in 8 minutes than most non-profits saw in a month. But while she spoke, her eyes found Dawson near the back. He stood very still, one hand on Eli's shoulder. He was not looking at the stage lights. He was looking at her chair. When the applause ended, he left quietly with his son before the donor circle could swallow them. He did not leave a business card. He did not ask for anything. That was the part Margot remembered longest. Saturday morning came too early. Dawson was in the workshop by 5:30, before Eli woke and before Bear accepted the day. He stood in front of the pegboard and lifted the framed certificate down from where it had faced the wall for nearly 4 years. Georgia Institute of Technology, School of Mechanical Engineering, the Sinclair Foundation Adaptive Design Fellowship, awarded to Dawson M. Reed, 2010. He set it glass up on the bench. Then he opened the bottom drawer of the file cabinet. Inside were old hard-bound notebooks, sketch pads, prototype photographs, and patent filings clipped in a stack. Active Frame Wheelchair System. Inventor, D. Reed. He sat with the folder on his lap as the workshop brightened. The M Active logo had been his. The rear camber geometry had been his. The small machined recess near the frame identifier had been his idea because Hannah hated large visible branding on mobility equipment. "If I wanted a billboard under me," she had said, "I'd marry advertising." Meridian had laughed when she said it. Then, after she was gone, they turned the chair into a premium line and turned Dawson into initials. DR, clean enough to be legal, small enough to be forgotten. He looked at the patent drawing and then at the memory of Margot Ellsworth rolling away from the table in a chair built from work that had begun in his kitchen for a woman he still missed every morning. "Daddy?" Eli stood in the doorway dragging his blanket, hair flattened on one side and wild on the other. "Why are you up so early?" Dawson closed the folder gently. "Looking at some old work." Eli patted closer. "Was it good work?" Dawson thought of Hannah turning in the prototype without scraping the cabinets. He thought of Margot moving across the ballroom with perfect control. It was honest work. That afternoon, a courier delivered a cream envelope addressed to Master Eli Reed, care of Reed Adaptive Renovations. Inside was a handwritten card. "Dear Eli, thank you for explaining cambered wheels to me on Friday. I learned more in 10 minutes than I did in my last engineering consult. Please tell your father the pecan pie was the best decision I made all night. Margot E." Beneath it was a hardback book on robotics, chosen by someone who had gone to a real bookstore, not delegated a task to a gift assistant. Eli read the card 3 times. Dawson read it twice. Then he walked back to the bench, slid the patent folder into the drawer, and did not change a single number on the Ellsworth proposal. He did not add Georgia Tech. He did not mention Meridian. He did not include a note saying, "By the way, I designed the chair that carried you across that ballroom." He let the bid stand on the work itself. 3 weeks later, Hadley Allard entered Margot's office with 3 thin folders. "Finalists for the site walkthroughs," she said. "Balin Brothers, McAllister and Vance, and a small firm out of North Charleston called Reed Adaptive Renovations. 2 employees, including the principal. Very unusual testimonials. I called 2 former clients, both wheelchair users. Both said the same thing. He didn't push the chair, didn't open the door too early, didn't talk to the caregiver instead of them, and asked the right questions." Margot picked up the Reed folder slowly. She recognized the name before she admitted it. Schedule him last. The walkthrough was set for the following Wednesday at 10. At 9:55, Margot rolled into the Ellsworth Heritage lobby and saw Dawson standing near the front desk in a clean work jacket, holding a paper map instead of a tablet. He looked up, not surprised, prepared. "Mr. Reed, Miss Ellsworth." They shook hands. Hadley, watching from 20 feet away, exhaled very quietly, For 90 minutes, Margot rolled and Dawson walked. He did not push. He did not hurry ahead to open doors before she reached them. He did not narrate what she could already see. He asked where the building made her adjust without comment, where the floor slope tired her shoulders, where historic preservation had become an excuse for modern exclusion. He marked every answer on the map. They argued about the service elevator. He proposed moving it 8 feet south. She proposed keeping it where it was and rebuilding the corridor around it. He looked again and said, "You're right. No ego. No apology theater. Just correction." They were in the second-floor west corridor when Russell Pemberton appeared with a younger man in a blazer behind him. Russell was 62, silver-haired, a board member, and the kind of wealthy man who could make concern sound like ownership. "Margot," he said, then looked at Dawson. "This must be your renovator." He extended a hand without quite seeing the person attached to it. "Russell Pemberton, board member. I've been telling Margot this project is becoming a very expensive personal statement. I'm sure you can deliver something more practical for less." Dawson shook his hand once. "The bid is the bid." Russell smiled. It was not a smile of pleasure. "We'll see. I'm bringing in Crescent Build Group for a comparison number. Same scope, lower price. Margot will like the savings." He walked away. The younger man followed, but as he turned, his eyes met Dawson's for one brief second. Dawson knew that face. Andrew Pratt, former CAD team at Meridian Mobility. A decent technician once, now wearing the careful expression of someone standing too close to someone else's theft. Andrew did not nod. He kept walking. When the corridor was empty, Margot said quietly, "Most contractors would have agreed with him to keep the contract." Dawson folded his map. "Most contractors don't have to look in my mirror." She rolled away first so he would not see the small smile. 5 weeks after the gala, Margot sat alone in the Ellsworth Tower at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night with the Reed adaptive proposal open beneath one desk lamp. The bid was tight. The numbers were honest. The construction calendar was conservative. But the first sentence was what kept her there. Universal access is not adaptation. It is original architecture. She had read that before, years ago. Somewhere in the messy period after Georgetown, before the accident, before the chair, before she understood personally how buildings could humiliate a body without ever meaning to. She opened the Ellsworth Foundation archive. The family fund her grandfather started in 1958 had absorbed the Sinclair Foundation when her father married her mother. Margot searched the academic grant ledger, 2010. Sinclair Foundation Adaptive Design Fellowship, Georgia Institute of Technology, recipient redacted under settlement 2021. She frowned. Redactions in that archive were rare and usually meant legal history someone with money had preferred to bury. She searched an academic database and found a dissertation abstract published under initials. The first sentence read, "Universal access is not adaptation. It is original architecture." Margot closed the laptop. She did not search further. She decided she wanted to hear the rest from him. She rolled to the window and looked at the Cooper River Bridge lights curved against the dark. When she was 25, a friend's younger brother had used a wheelchair. She had searched for writing about disability that did not sound like pity with footnotes. She found that dissertation, read the abstract 3 times, and remembered the sentence because it treated access as beauty, not obligation. She had been moving through the world on the work of a stranger for a long time. That same night, on Daniel Island, Eli sat at the kitchen table with a half-built robot and 3 Lego pieces. "Dad?" "Yes, buddy?" "Do you think Margot is sad?" Dawson set the dish towel down. He considered the question carefully because children deserve careful answers when they ask about other people's hearts. "No. I think she's careful." Eli snapped a motor into place. "Like Mom was?" Dawson did not turn around immediately. "Yes. like Mom was. Mom was sad sometimes. She was, but mostly careful. Dawson breathed once. Mostly careful. Eli nodded. I think Margot is careful too. Later, in the workshop, Dawson looked at Hannah's photograph on the shelf and realized he had not turned the Georgia Tech certificate back toward the wall. It still faced the room. He let it stay. 8 weeks after the gala, the Ellsworth Hospitality Board met on the 45th floor at 10 o'clock in the morning. 11 members sat around the long table. Russell Pemberton sat 3 seats from Margot. Hadley stood behind Margot with a leather folder she had prepared for 10 days. Russell opened with a soft voice and sharp knife. I want to thank Margot for her work during a difficult 14 months, but this board owes itself honesty. I have growing concerns about the heritage renovation, concerns confirmed by Financial Review. As of last Tuesday, I and 3 minority shareholders representing 14.8% equity have signed a motion of no confidence in current executive leadership. The room did not move. Russell continued. Additionally, Crescent Build Group has prepared an alternative renovation proposal, same scope, 22% lower. I ask the board to consider both proposals before approving any current contract. Margot folded her hands. Before we vote, I'd like the board to hear once more from the principal designer. He is downstairs. Hadley left and returned with Dawson, who entered carrying 1 binder and wearing his good jacket. In the boardroom mirror behind the table, he looked exactly like what Russell wanted him to look like. Small contractor, modest means, easy to dismiss. He presented for 4 minutes. Load-bearing constraints, corridor width, elevator shaft limitations, the cost of moving infrastructure versus rebuilding the approach, projected occupancy lift across 2 guest categories the hotel had never properly served. His numbers were plain, unflashing, correct. When he finished, Russell smiled. Mr. Reed, I'm sure you are a fine small contractor, but Crescent's comparison bid is meaningfully more affordable. Would you care to comment? Dawson opened his mouth. Before he could speak, a chair scraped at the far end of the table. Wendell Hartigan stood. Wendell was a senior vice president at Meridian Mobility and an industry advisor Margot had brought onto the board 6 months earlier for accessibility consultation. Until then, he had said nothing. Before this board votes, Wendell said, members should know a fact Meridian Mobility's general counsel confirmed at 9:15 this morning. The Crescent Build Group proposal incorporates 3 pinch point principles protected under patents in the M-Active series filed under researcher initials DR between 2013 and 2017. Meridian has not licensed those principles to Crescent. I would ask Mr. Reed to confirm whether he is the DR on those patents. The room became very still. Dawson looked at Margot. She did not look surprised. She looked steady. Yes, Dawson said. I am. Russell's face did not move at first. Then the color drained from it. Wendell slid a folder down the table. This is the infringement documentation. The no confidence motion cannot proceed on the basis of a comparison bid subject to immediate litigation. Hadley opened her leather folder and placed another document before the board chair. Additionally, Crescent's consulting subcontractor is Andrew Pratt, formerly of Meridian Mobility, who had access to protected design documents. We recommend postponing any vote involving Crescent pending legal review. The room went silent in the way powerful rooms go silent when the person expected to bleed has arrived with facts. Russell withdrew the motion in under 10 minutes. He was the first to leave. The board emptied slowly. When the door clicked shut, only Margot and Dawson remained at the long table. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. Charleston winter light washed the room the color of old paper. Margot did not say thank you. She said, "You sat at my table that night." Dawson sat across from her. "You sat at mine." For a while, neither spoke. Finally, she asked, "How long have you known I was sitting in your chair?" since the gala. You didn't say. It didn't seem like mine to say. She looked down at the brushed aluminum frame beneath her hand, where the small model etching sat partly hidden by her elbow. My father commissioned this through Meridian after the accident. He never told me who designed it. I think he didn't want me to feel like I owed anyone. Dawson nodded. He funded my fellowship at Georgia Tech in 2010. Sinclair Foundation, she said. I found the redaction. I wondered if you would. I knew the sentence before I knew your name. The first one? Yes. Dawson looked down at his hands. Hannah helped write that sentence. She said if we called access adaptation, we were already admitting the original building had been designed for too few people. Margot did not look away. Tell me about her. So he did. He told her about Hannah on the porch in Decatur, diagnosis folded in her purse, saying, "Promise me you'll keep making things, Dawes." He told her about the first prototype in their kitchen. The break tension Hannah insisted on testing herself, even when her hands could barely close. The third-generation frame she used for only 6 months before the illness took too much. The chair, he said quietly, was the only thing in our house that did not lie to her. Margot's eyes shone, but she did not pity him. I am sorry. So am I. For your loss. For your accident. She gave a small breath. I have stopped being sorry for it. Mostly. Dawson nodded. I have stopped too. Mostly. He moved his hand a little closer across the table. He did not touch her. He let it rest where it could be reached. She did not move hers away. 3 months later, the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel was a construction site, and for the first time in its 112 years, the building seemed to be apologizing with action instead of plaques. The second-floor west corridor was open to studs. The service elevator stayed where it was, but the shaft was being reframed for a wider car. The lobby became a maze of plywood barriers, caution tape, temporary ramps, and signs that said, "Watch your step" in 3 places where Dawson insisted step should not be the default verb. Margot developed a Thursday evening habit. After the contractors went home, she came by in jeans and a denim jacket with coffee from across the street. No Hadley, no board packet, no donor smile, just Margot. Dawson met her at the side door each week. Eli came when homework allowed it, wearing a small construction helmet and carrying a tape measure he believed made him assistant foreman. Dawson taught him how to call out a laser-level reading. Eli taught Margot how to fold paper boats and float them in the clean rainwater collected near the elevator pit. The Pemberton lawsuit still sat on some attorney's desk, filed mostly to preserve Russell's pride after his power failed. It would be dismissed in May. Local press tried twice to turn the story into romance. Both Margot and Dawson declined comment so flatly that the third attempt died of boredom. One Thursday, rain came hard around 6. Eli looked up from beneath his helmet and said, "You should come over for spaghetti." Margot looked at Dawson. "He's being literal," Dawson said. "He's been waiting for the right rain." 3 days earlier, Dawson had built a low cedar ramp at his front steps. He had not told her. He had not told anyone. He simply built it because invitation without access is just decoration. Margot rolled up the ramp easily. They did not have spaghetti because Eli changed his mind at the last second and demanded pancakes for dinner. Dawson put cinnamon in the batter. Margot raised one eyebrow, tasted them, then ate 3. Eli fell asleep halfway through his second pancake, cheek on his forearm. Dawson stood without speaking, brought a wool blanket from the couch, and laid it over his son's shoulders without waking him. Margot watched with the careful attention she gave to anything that mattered. They sat at the kitchen table while rain struck the porch roof. Bear circled twice and settled across Eli's feet. "I've never had pancakes for dinner," Margot said. Dawson looked at her. "That's because no one has loved you correctly." He heard himself say it. He did not look away. Neither did she. When she left an hour later, she did not stay the night. She did not need to. She placed one hand lightly on Eli's shoulder, then the other, just for a moment, on the inside of Dawson's wrist where his pulse lived close to the skin. She said nothing. He said nothing. She rolled down the cedar ramp into the wet street, porch light catching rain on the spokes of her wheels. After she left, Dawson carried Eli to bed, then went to the workshop and turned the Georgia Tech certificate fully toward the room. 1 year after the gala, on October 3rd, the renovated Ellsworth Heritage Hotel opened to the public. The press preview filled the new ballroom with 220 guests, including several donors who had been present the night Margot sat ignored near the dessert table and were now trying very hard not to remember where they had placed their eyes. The new stage was low and elegant, built at Margot's height without looking like a compromise. The main entrance welcomed everyone through the same doors. The elevator buttons sat where hands could reach them. The ballroom aisles widened without announcing themselves. The hotel had not become less historic. It had become more honest. Margot delivered opening remarks from the stage. She thanked the construction team, design partners, architecture firm of record, and longtime staff who had worked through months of dust and plywood. She did not thank the board. Then she looked toward the back of the room. There is one person listed in the credits as lead accessibility designer. He would prefer to remain there, in the credits. I am asking him up anyway. Mr. Reed. Dawson stood near the back with Eli on one side and Hadley on the other. He did not move. Eli, who had apparently been waiting for this exact moment his entire life, placed both hands on the small of his father's back and pushed. Dawson walked forward. He stepped onto the low stage and stood beside Margot. For a moment he looked at the microphone as if it were a tool he had not agreed to use. Then he leaned in. "A building is worth what it lets people move through," he said. "Tonight, this one is finally worth what it cost." He stepped back. The room stood. The applause began unevenly, then gathered itself, rolling from the front tables, catching in the back, and returning stronger. It was not the loudest sound Dawson had ever heard, but it was one of the few that made him want to leave and stay at the same time. At the back table, Russell Pemberton rose quietly, finished his water, set the glass on the linen, and walked out, without making a scene. It was, in its own way, the most adult thing he had done in 18 months. Margot reached for Dawson's hand. He took it. She did not let go through the rest of the ovation. She did not let go when the band returned. She did not let go for nearly 2 minutes. Hadley turned slightly toward the seating chart and pressed the heel of her hand into the corner of one eye. Eli climbed onto a chair to see better, violating 3 house rules in one motion, and no one who loved him cared. 6 months after the reopening, on a Sunday evening when the harbor air still carried the last cool of winter and the first sweetness of magnolias, 3 people moved along the seawall on the Battery. Eli ran ahead, taller by an inch, and convinced seagulls respected him personally. Margot rolled along the brick path behind him. Dawson walked at her left, close enough to be near, far enough not to crowd. The chair beneath her was the same M-Active frame she had used the night of the gala. Meridian had offered her a new one twice. She refused both times. Some things are not kept because they are perfect. They are kept because they tell the truth. "Wendell called," Dawson said. "Meridian is filing corrected inventor records next week. Generations 1 through 3. Margot nodded. "Good. Quiet settlement. Mom, still good." "And Georgia Tech posted the endowment Friday," she said. "The Hannah and Dawson Reed Endowment for Adaptive Design." He had to clear his throat before speaking. "You put her name first. It belonged first." He looked toward the water. "Thank you." Margot reached over and touched his cuff. You're welcome. They walked another 100 feet in silence. A woman in her 70s using a chair passed the other direction and gave Margot a small, private nod, the kind of recognition the rest of the world walks past without seeing. Eli came running back with a small spiral shell cupped in both hands. Margot, look! He placed it carefully in her lap as if delivering a technical drawing. Margot turned the shell in her fingers, then closed her hand around it. She stopped the chair. Dawson stopped beside her and bent down, not because she needed him to, but because somewhere in the last 15 months, this had become how they met each other when something mattered, face to face, without height deciding the conversation. I never asked to be invited to anyone's table, Margot said. Dawson smiled softly. Neither of us was looking for one. I'm still not asking. I know. I am just staying. I am here. Some mornings, Margot still woke in the recovery year of 2018, the August sun on the wrong side of the room, the old panic briefly convinced it had not finished with her. But the walk back to today had become shorter. The room she returned to had warmer light. Dawson still missed Hannah, not as a wound needing to close, but as a love that had built part of him and remained there. Eli still asked questions too large for breakfast and too honest for easy answers. None of them were repaired in the cheap way stories sometimes promise. They were simply together, and together had become its own architecture. The harbor light went orange behind the masts. A church bell on Meeting Street rang the half hour. Eli spotted another shell and waited for permission to bring it back. Margot placed the first shell in her jacket pocket. Dawson straightened and walked beside her as they continued along the seawall. A year earlier, a ballroom had ignored a woman in a wheelchair until a single father made space at his table. He did not know she was the CEO. He did not know she carried his forgotten work beneath her. She did not know he was the designer whose sentence had lived in her mind for years. They knew only that one person had been left at the edge of the room, and another person had chosen not to let that be the whole story. That is dignity, not charity, not rescue, not the loud performance of kindness after the name tag is known. Dignity is seeing someone before the room tells you they matter. Grace is what grows when that seeing is returned. And sometimes redemption does not arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrives as pecan pie, a child's question, a ramp built before anyone asks, and one quiet invitation that says, without needing to say it, you belong at this table, too. Life often teaches us the deepest lessons in the quietest moments. The story of Margot Ellsworth and Dawson Reed is a powerful reminder that true dignity is not about grand gestures, wealth, or titles. It's about seeing people for who they truly are before the world even notices. Margot, sitting alone at a gala in her wheelchair, could have been overlooked as she often was. Yet Dawson's simple invitation to share a table transformed the evening. He didn't rescue her. He included her. This distinction is profound. It reminds us that kindness is most powerful when it is unsolicited, genuine, and rooted in respect. It also teaches that our contributions, whether through empathy, innovation, or perseverance, ripple far beyond what we see. Dawson's careful work in designing accessible spaces and Margot's acknowledgement of it highlight the quiet impact of integrity and thoughtfulness. Life's value isn't measured by attention or applause. It's measured by how we make space for others and honor their presence. So, as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, how can I see people today without bias, without expectation, without performance? Share your thoughts below. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to explore more stories that celebrate humanity, resilience, and the subtle power of compassion.